Talking about Cleveland L. Sellers Jr. and my life during the period of segregation, one of the things that I recognize is that many of the young people that we are talking to now don't have an understanding of what segregation was. It simply meant the separation of race, and that was in every institution and every social organization there was. I went to a segregated school. I went to the theater, and I had to go into the segregated section. When you look at the segregation, you find out that there were certain etiquettes that one had to follow. If I was going to even my father was going to a white person's home, he could not go to the front door. He would have to go around to the back in order for him to be recognized. And so you would even have, in places like Mississippi, each community had its own code of conduct. But if you go to a place like Mississippi, if I was walking down the street and there was a family coming toward me that was white, I had two options. One is to get off the sidewalk and allow them to pass by. The other one would simply be that I would have to direct my eyes down to their feet, because I was not to make eye-to-eye contact. That was considered to be belligerent, and there were consequences for that, which usually led to arrest or beatings or whatever you might have. So this is the condition in which we came up in, and our parents and our community built institutions that would be parallel institutions for the purpose of providing us with the substance, the principles, the kind of beliefs and systems that would allow us to not get sidetracked and become bitter and self-destructive and those kinds of things, and trying to protect us from the wrath of the segregation. So that was the South that I grew up in. And sometimes when you're talking to young people, you can tell them about going to get a hamburger. And somebody would come to the back door and ask you what you wanted, and they would make a list of it. They would take your money, go back inside, and they would bring you back maybe a brown paper bag and a bottle of soda. And then you would have to fend for yourself, but under no circumstances were you allowed to go inside the facility at all. And so that's the way it used to work, and you can see how the parallels would impact on you, because nowadays people take those things for granted, when in fact, in order to change those things, we had to make sacrifices and shed blood and tears along our way in the struggle for justice and for peace and equality for all. For me specifically, the incident which was my kind of awareness and social consciousness kind of developing was the Emmitt Till murder back in 1955, just before the Montgomery bus boycott, and right after the school desegregation. And we find that this young man was sent to Mississippi by his mother because she didn't want him to stay around Chicago and get in any kind of trouble, so she sent him to her uncle's. And the long story short is that he and his cousins went to the local store downtown, and the allegation was that he whistled at a white woman, and that little simple whistle got him in trouble, because 2 nights later the woman's husband and the husband's brother came back and kidnapped Emmitt Till, who was 13 years old, and took him out. They rode him around, and they wanted to know why did he think it was okay to make any kind of comment to a white woman. And so they murdered him and threw him in the river. and that young man was named Emmitt Till. So Emmitt Till was the person that my class and my community and young people began to focus in on. And we began to have discussions with our teachers who rallied around us and wanted to get us to understand that that kind of situation, there had to be a challenge, and that challenge would have to be with us. So we had to do the appropriate kinds of things. We had to get the education, we had to get the skills, and but we never forgot from which we had come. And so we had a responsibility to the community to come back and provide some services to it to help other young people make that trip through. And the question would come up of, well, why don't we just, kind of organize a posse and go down? And that was ruled out. So we had to be more creative in terms of developing strategies and tactics that began to kind of cut away at this institution of segregation. It was throughout the South, and it was entrenched, and it was very deadly and very violent, even to young people. So Emmitt Till is an example of the young person that kind of brought in my consciousness and got me moving in the direction of committing myself to a struggle. And then Birmingham, we see Birmingham and we know Birmingham in 1963 when Dr. King and SCLC ran out of demonstrators. He went in and made a plea one night at a mass meeting for new demonstrators to come along. And then as he was making the plea, youngsters in the church said, "Dr. King, I'll go." And they were 13 and 14 and 15 and 16 years old. So we can go, because if we get arrested, there's no problem. If our parents get arrested again, they don't have a job, and it makes for double trouble if we will take it on. And Dr. King said, well, come on. We're going to have a mass march. We have stopped the marches now. The Bull Connors was using the dogs on students. They were using the fire hoses with pressure up to 75 pounds of pressure coming out of those hoses, which actually lifted students up off the ground and threw them into buildings and into trees. So Birmingham was very special. One of the leaders of that march was a gentleman by the name of Dick Gregory. And it is told, this is what he tells, or what he used to tell, he's deceased now, that he ended up in jail because his role was to come in and lead the marches to the site that they were going to demonstrate at, except the students were on time, and so they had left him. So he had to come in at the end of the march. I just tell you about leaders, if young people will get it right. You come in late if you keep with your slack self. But anyhow, he was in jail, and he said he saw all these kids in there. They were packed in those jails. During the period of 2 weeks, there were 3,457 young people who went to jail. Many of them were first graders. They were all from different high schools across Birmingham, and they volunteered. It became a cause. They would have at a certain time, the windows would go up and kids would come out. The teacher had the kind of courage that students could recognize to be able to help the students where they could. Mm-hmm. And that becomes very important for people to know and to understand. And then they would let kids out of jail because their parents had paid a bond or somebody had paid a bond for them. And they would let them out like at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And they would be like 7 and 8 years old. They just put them out on the sidewalk. So you had to make do for all of that kind of stuff. But the kids never, ever had a problem with that. They kept coming as long as Dr. King said, I need you to march in this struggle for freedom. I need you. They would come. And so Dick Gregory was in the jail, and he saw this little boy. And he said, he was about yay tall, not tall at all. And he said to him, he said, "How old are you?" And the little boy looked at him and said, "I'm 3." And he said, 3 years old? Why are you in jail? He said, freedom. He was trying to say freedom.